Vet medicine is not getting any easier. And the sad truth is that it never will. Most clinics definitely care about their people. So the issue really isn't caring. The issue is that busy clinics often default to this sense of urgency or survival mode without having a system in place that really facilitates physical and emotional durability. So if you are sore, stressed, tired, frazzled, or generally unhappy with the culture that is in your workplace, you really only have two options. One is to kind of resign yourself to the state as it is, being unhappy and dissatisfied, or two, installing a system into your clinic that will consistently support your physical and emotional durability and that of the people around you. And that's what we're going to unpack today in the Resilient Vet podcast. My name is Aaron Shaw. I am a passionate person about building physical and emotional resilience in veterinary professionals. I'm an occupational therapist and strength coach times 30 years this year. And this podcast is really focused on helping give you, the listener, really practical tools that you could implement today to help build your resilience. We know how challenging vet med is, again, physically and emotionally. And so we want to make sure that you leave every episode with actionable items that you can really put into practice today, tomorrow, and forevermore. And so we're going to unpack this concept of installing durability systems in your practice today. And I'm going to get some help with this with my co-host, Dr. Jennifer Edwards. Welcome.
Thank you, Aaron. Um, I'm so excited for this episode. What a great topic. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Jennifer Edwards, and I am a former veterinary practice owner. I am now a conscious leadership coach and a professional speaker. And I work with leaders and teams on the inner side of team development, the inner side of leadership. I am the founder of the Core Element Leadership Framework. And I'm here to help you create the best cultures, the best experience, the best environments that you can so that we can all have lots of resilience and longevity in this amazing profession. So, Aaron, as I said, I'm very intrigued on this topic because there's so many things. And I remember when I was a practice owner, it was the same way that, we hear things, we learn things, we have ideas, and we think, oh, that would be so amazing to implement this in my practice. And then there's the reality of it. So, in your experience, when a practice owner or a practice leader is setting out to improve their team health, their durability, focusing on more of the physical wellness, physical durability side of things, what do you find are some of the most common mistakes that people make in trying to start these types of things in their hospitals?
Oftentimes, with the leaders that I talk to, it seems to be they try to go too broad or do too much too soon. So my business, which is called Project Vetsman, you can look it up, projectvetsman.com. Our goal is to really make sure that we take something that's oftentimes starts off as being inspirational. Really, I really want this thing. I want to have a healthy, engaged team who are, can sustain the career for the long term. But I want to take that inspiration. We want to make sure we switch it into operational. So it becomes literally the thread of how clinics work. And so the mistakes that I think people make, and we're all human beings here. So human nature is even this concept of, the New Year's resolution. Like, okay, this year I have a big lofty goal and I'm super inspired and motivated and it makes sense and I understand it. Want to be healthier, whatever that is to you. And that's not bad, but it's missing the component of how do you operationalize that into your life? And that's where um, opportunity exists. And that's what I like helping vet teams install. So even when the inspiration kind of falters or motivation kind of falters, it's okay because there's systems in place.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's really a part of veterinary practice that is often overlooked. And I love that word that you keep using, that word install. And it kind of reminds me of back, we don't have to do it as much anymore, but we'd have to install software, from little disks onto our computer. Um, and so in this context, when you use that word install, how does that differ from, say, you know, having a staff meeting and educating people or saying, hey, I was listening to this guy, Aaron Shaw, on LinkedIn or on a podcast, and he said XYZ, and we're going to start doing it. What is the difference really between this installation process and, say, just educating your team?
Yeah, good question. I think this is where it gets real, and it does take a little bit more effort in a sense, but it's really about creating structure. So really installing, maybe to say what it's not. It's not giving a wellness talk or having bringing your team together for a lunch and learn. It's not having a poster that says, here's some safety things, or here's how to take care of your body, or here's how to eat well so you have energy all day. It's really about standard operating procedures, SOPs, that are built into the culture of what you people do day in and day out. And we're talking about behaviors that are practical, that are observable, that are repeatable, and that really these behaviors live inside the workflow, not as some external. Again, this is where like the lunch and learn sort of concept is, where they're outside of the day-to-day stuff, or worse yet, when people are already super busy, and then leadership with their heart in the right place is, oh, we're gonna go do this. We're all gonna try to run out the door and do an extra 15 minutes of we're going to shut down the clinic and, um, walk around the building to get some fresh air or something like that, which is not bad. But if you're doing that on top of everything that people are already doing, a good intention
Mm.
can feel like, oh, it's just one more thing, even though the thing is not bad to do. So we have to really weave this into, again, moment to moment, day to day things. So I think what I'll do is kind of give some examples through really three of several pillars that I talk about in this product that I have, which is called the Durable Vet Team Blueprint. So it's this blueprint, it's really this pathway to help install this into clinics. And the three that I can really kind of cover would be this concept of number one, protection. So it's protecting our body. It's no secret that most vet professionals have a certain amount of aches and pains in their body from the work that they do. The other pillar that I'll talk about with examples would be fueling, which is nutrition, and the third one will be strengthening. Like how do we literally um, strengthen our body so the work actually feels physically easier. And so when we are talking about installing these things, we really need to make sure that our targets are reasonable. This is where being a little bit humble and a little bit patient on, change takes time. We want to make sure that behaviors that we're talking about are really are triggered with things that already happen in the workflow. So we're not really trying to like force a bunch of new stuff. We're trying to recognize habits and rituals and, as patients come in and patients to discharge, like these normal flows as points in time where we can say, oh, this is a good time to do X, to be more durable, to be safer. And of course, this has to come from leadership. Really, it's about modeling the behavior that we want, reinforcing it, and being free to speak about it. I think one of the most freeing things in the world, not to go too deep into just straight up communication skills, but it is so powerful when a leader can, you know, speak to individuals on the team or the team as a whole and say, I am going to work to help us be more physically and emotionally resilient and durable. So bear with me as I'm going to, work. We're all going to work together, and you put it out there on the table. It's empowering from the get-go. And it gives you a little bit of grace too, because if you can just say like, hey, we're all going to like learn as we go.
Yeah. I love that. Really emphasizing the, because that's my passion, of course, is leadership, and really emphasizing that it's not just a dictatorship when it comes to these sorts of things. It's a leadership. You're leading the team through this kind of almost sounds like a wellness transformation experience in a way, or clinic. And it's not just like you said, like a lunch and learn a talk. It's an actual culture shift. A couple of things as you were speaking that came to my mind was this idea of like, number one is context and just making sure that this comes as a choice, that there's buy-in, right? Because that also is communication style, leadership style. Is, this is what we're doing at the hospital, and you're each free to choose to participate or not, right? Because as soon as it's like, oh, another thing I have to do, it becomes a burden or it becomes obligatory, then the buy-in is less. We're, less likely to have success. Um, and with that, then I love the bear with me, right? Because yeah, this is going to take some adjusting on all of our parts, but yet we can all be in this together. So I really, really love that context that you painted. So you mentioned that there are three pillars, and the first one is the pillar of what you're calling protect. So tell me a little bit more about that. What's involved in this protect pillar?
Yeah, good question. And I will just kind of to put a point on the idea that this leadership really matters here, and which is different than the boss or the clinic owner, perhaps. I mean, where there are leaders that we should recognize that are frontline workers that are really on the floor doing things. But the idea that it has to start with some sort of leadership, and again, being humble and bearing with me and recognizing that when work with teams to install the durable vet team blueprint, it is at minimum a 6-month program, 6-month process, and it is slow and takes time. And as you said, like you can't, stand up on the top of a chair or top of a desk with your hands on your hips and say, we're all going to be doing this starting today. And so be happy and be safe and be strong and eat well and sleep well. Like that's not how it works. And so, um, yeah, a little patience and consistency. Again, we're talking like micro habits and things will go a long way. But yeah, so to speak on, to give some like hard examples here, one of the pillars that I speak to is one that we call protect. So this is really protecting our body, protecting our emotions, protecting, our little invisible force field that's around us to make sure that we are safe. And in this one, I can give an example of kind of the physical wear and tear that vet med has and kind of as part of the job. Injury prevention, these behaviors to minimize the risk of injury would be of super high value. There's very clear research that shows when people are injured at work or in pain at work, their job satisfaction is less. It's probably not rocket science. It makes sense. If you're physically uncomfortable at work, your job satisfaction is going to be less. And so, what can we do to help protect? So, what I talk about is an example would be when working with patients or really anything that you have to lift or transfer to get leadership and get the team on board to say, what we're going to do when there are physically challenging things that we need to lift or move around, that we all take a pause for 5 seconds. 5 long seconds. Which even just try to pause right now for 3 seconds is like, wow, that's a long time. But if you take a pause for 5 seconds before, again, moving that larger patient, or maybe it's even partly the weight of something, but also the awkwardness of the position that you're in. So it doesn't have to just be, a 90-pound dog. It can just be a weird position that you're in. But to take pause for 5 seconds and ask, do I need help? Can I adjust the table that this is on? Is there a device or a tool I can use to make this a little bit easier? And really make sure that we, starting with the leadership, can speak openly and say, let's start having these words. Do I need help? Do I need a second person to help me with this thing? And to really get that as the expectation before any high risk move. So it's giving sometimes explicit language, an explicit cue or a trigger where it's like, oh, this dog is pretty big and I need to help, adjust them on the table, and permission for people to say, okay, I'm doing this thing. And we've all agreed that there's a 5-second timeout, if you will, just for that person to assess. Now, on the surface of it, that sounds pretty easy. Well, yeah, no kidding, I do that. Well, I can tell you, I've been in a lot of clinics observing as like the quiet guy over in the corner. No, it does not happen, or it doesn't happen nearly enough because everybody's in a rush, got to hurry up, push through, and they're just sort of the culture is you just got to make it work. I mean, I was just in a clinic 2 weeks ago and watching somebody roll a table with a dog who was anesthetized on it through a heavy door by herself. So it's like partly holding onto the dog, partly trying to hold open the door and push this cart through. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, man, like one, that looks super ch physically challenging. Two, probably not super safe. And three, it's just what they do. It was it was nothing like there wasn't any like even, pause of like, is this the right thing to be doing? That is a culture. Accepting that as a culture, well, we can also say we can install something where we accept that the culture is we take 5 seconds and say, I'm gonna need some help getting through this doorway. In leadership, we've all agreed that the culture is we ask. Another one quickly would be for protection would be for people who are in surgeries or doing procedures that if there are multiple points in procedures that I sometimes have to point out to people who are in the operating room where like, oh, the first 5 minutes you always check in with so and so, or oh, you talk to the anesthesiast, or the tech gives you some tool or something moves around. In every one of those, that dance that happens where something changes or an activity changes or the task at hand changes is an opportunity to pause and take a break. Again, there's really good research as well on micro breaks in the operating room on how it decreases pain and actually improves focus, contrary to what this particular study I'm thinking it was in the human OR, which I can't imagine would be that dramatically different in a veterinary space either, because it's physically demanding as well. But having these 30-second posture rechecks where there's just a break, reset your posture, sit up nice and tall, these can be literally become culture, standard operating procedure, just baked into what happens. But it takes the installation of this program, the installation, the discussion, the practice of it, the feedback system, and learning how to do it to really make it stick.
Yeah, it's funny because as you were talking, and I was, obviously I've spent many, many, many hours of my life in an OR, um, and how I think at first it would be a team effort. Like everybody going, all right, 30 seconds, right? Because it has to become a habit and it has to, so all habits start with an intentionality, a consciousness, conscious effort. And when it's a group effort, it's even more effective. Now, one of the things I found interesting, because I'm thinking back to all of the SOPs that I had in my practice that I've seen in a lot of other practices. And, when it comes to safety, we had SOPs for, a lot of the things that were more legal, like obviously radiation safety. We had SOPs for, and we always talked about, well, we had SOPs for even other things like, if there was a burglar, like that kind of thing. Um, but I can't say that we necessarily put all of the ergonomics into actual SOPs, and I think that's a fantastic idea because it really solidifies it as this is actually real. Like this is now tangible. We mean it. And this is a policy just like every other policy in this hospital. So could you maybe give me an example of what it would actually look like to turn ergonomics into an SOP versus just the typical, don't forget to, bend your knees when you lift the dog, reminder as somebody's flying by when you're about to pick up a dog.
Yes. If there's no other focus of maybe the rest of my career is to make sure that ergonomics goes beyond bend your knees, 'cause then it just makes me, what if I had hair, I'd pull it out. So there's so much more to it than that. Yes. So for the SOP for ergonomics, and let's just kind of go back to that one in the OR, but I think it could be really this concept of a micro break where you literally stop and pause for 30 seconds. And there's a series of movements and exercises which I often give clients. And again, everything we're talking about here is science-based. This isn't, we're all stuck with the physiology, being human beings and physiology and tissue strain and awkward postures, where this is very real stuff. And the evidence on moving your body well and changing positions regularly is crystal clear. So the question, of course, is like, okay, yes, and how do we get this to to be a normal part of the day. The micro breaks, I've had some people use like a checklist. You've read that book, Checklist Manifesto, which is also a great book on making sure you get things done. But being having these in the OR where procedure, whatever they're doing, takes 45 minutes to an hour, there are two little check boxes that say 30-second rest or 30-second posture check. And you're not supposed to leave the OR. This is part of the learning process, but you don't leave the OR until we've done our two posture checks because we've agreed. This is again, clinics can kind of make their own decision around this. We've agreed that because of the flow of this particular procedure, that there's a little mini switch that happens about 25 minutes in. Great. During that mini switch, that's an opportunity to correct our posture, to relieve this neck pain that's kind of growing or whatever's happening. And our goal, our culture is that we want to get two of these posture checks in during this particular procedure. So now it becomes actionable as a reminding point. Of course, at this stage of the game, the team would already all be on board. We all understand what this means. We all understand the value of it. So yes, there has to be an education component up front. So to be clear, like I'm not anti, you know, 1 hour CE to learn something. That's great. But it's that and installing it and practicing it and getting a buddy system to where we can hold each other accountable either generally or literally naming people. Who are the teams today? These two people, these two people, and these two people. And we're keeping an eye on each other's posture, body mechanics, nutrition, movement, stress level. Like, like, hey, man, that was a really tough case. There was, euthanasia that had to happen. I'm going to tag you out. You need to go out for a walk. So these things can be um, literally built into practice SOPs and not just bend your knees.
Yeah. Bend your knees and everything will be great. And this, again, it just speaks to the importance of having buy-in, right, from the whole team. This becomes like everybody's engaged, everybody's bought into this and is in agreement. Or at least the people who are participating are bought in and in agreement. Um, and at the same time, having somewhat of a structure in place to guide this process because there's so many nuances to it. And the more you talk, the more I realize, like, wow, this is so much more than just, quote, we want to be healthier. So we've talked a lot about the physical, posture and the protecting of the body and all of that, and some micro resets and breaks that can occur, particularly during lengthy surgeries. Now let's shift gears a little bit. We obviously talk somewhat about nutrition, right? We almost every episode we end up talking because it is so important and it is one of the biggest neglected areas in veterinary medicine. Not only do people barely have time to stop, they don't take lunch breaks, but when they do, the choices of food are not always the best that they can be from a nutrition standpoint, from a standpoint of keeping them going. So you mentioned the second pillar that you wanted to talk about was fuel for the body, and I'm curious to hear what more you have to say about that.
Yes, I would love to get fueling and nutrition into just regular open and honest conversations in vet medicine. And I know that nutrition can be, well, it seems like a lot of the stuff I talk about can peak. There can be some resistance to because it is very personal, the way I move or the way I, exercise or do mobility or fuel myself or sleep or don't sleep. Like these things are really kind of personal space. But at the same time, I rely on you to show up with your A game to do your job and to help me do my job because so many things that I need to do, I need help doing. And so I think that, and not this goes without saying, of course, if I'm the customer coming in with my dog, I do not want to have the person that I'm engaging with be, unfed for the past 9 hours because they've been, quote, too busy to eat, or they're coming off of a sugar crash or, whatever sort of um, very real physiological response to their nutrition, that impacts their care, their clinical decision making. That is not fair for the client and the patient. So um, I will step off my soapbox on that for now. Um, but it's super valuable. So I think that so how do we take this concept of, we want to be well fueled so we can have, great focus. sustain energy throughout the day, better decision making. Um, and we need to do this in a way that's not based on willpower alone, because turns out more often than not, I don't have a whole heck of a lot of willpower. So please don't put a cookie freshly baked on my just outside of my office door, because I will not resist eating that. So some examples, some practical examples. We could have a morning fueling SOP, if you will. And this is where leadership would set the expectation that every day, every morning, it starts with making sure everybody has hydration for their first set of appointments and a readily available snack or meal, you know, accessible for you. Because yes, I can agree. Again, from owning my own practice, like, yeah, the idea of sitting down for a lunch or having these like really beautifully structured times to sit down and unwind is not realistic. So I'm not going to play that game. It has to be practical in the chaos of a busy clinic. And so to set us up for success, the leadership before starting, and again, you could do this with a buddy system. And again, we weave this into culture over time. You can even gamify it a little bit. Hey, do you get your water? You get your snack? Is it at your desk? Is it at, that's charging station? Is it somewhere that's accessible? There it is. I see, yep, cheers to the water. And so having things in place that are intentional, we all know, like, yep, we'll wait another 30 seconds because so-and-so is filling up their water bottle, or so-and-so is grabbing their Greek yogurt or cheese stick or apple or banana or whatever from their lunch bag, and they're putting it at a designated spot where they know they're not going to sit down and eat it, but they're going to be able to grab a bite, grab a sip, and keep going. Is it perfect? No. Is it better than most any other clinic I ever see? By 1,000%. It's at least setting people up for success. And again, starting with the leadership, if we can just say, leaders want this, they want the results of, a well-fed, steady energy team. But it does take these little micro habits, these tiny changes. So I'm not saying clinic shuts down for 20 minutes in the morning and the afternoon for a designated, break per se. But at the very least, you could take 90 seconds, have a well-placed snack available, and say, this is kind of the expectation. Because I'm going to need your A game as long as possible. And I'm going to need you to hydrate sometime mid-morning and to grab a snack of something mid-morning. So as soon as you set up your stuff, then we're going to unlock the front door, and it's go time. And again, like, if you can be kind of tongue in cheek about this stuff, you can gamify it and kind of lighten it up. Like, okay, we got to wait on so and so. You got to get your snacks out. No snacks. We're not open till the snacks are out. Like, we can. Every clinic has their own personality, but we can really lean into that and make it a win for everybody.
Yeah, one of the things that comes to mind for me as I'm listening is this idea of accessibility, because I've worked at a lot of different practices over my career, like not just obviously I had my own, but doing relief work, you go in and out of a lot of different places. And there are regulations, and especially for AHA accredited practices and whatnot about like where you can keep drinks and where you can keep snacks and for good reason, right? Like I think we get a little bit blind to some of the icky things in vet med. And, we used to joke, somebody's, flushing an abscess with one hand and eating a sandwich with the other. Like not really, but like we used to joke like
Sure.
probably that's what vets do. And there's probably vets listening, nodding their heads, and team members as well. So there is a responsibility about that, and there's also regulations about that. However, I've also been in practices where they did not have a spot that was okay. And it was literally in another, like almost, it was in the stairwell. You had to go through a door, you had to go like to get your water bottle. And when it takes that much effort to go to get your water bottle, you're not going to drink enough water during the day because even if you get to a point where you have a minute, the doctor's just not out of the room yet, you can just run. You're going to take a sip, put your water bottle back down and run back out. And that one sip isn't going to be enough. So the idea of accessibility, I think, is also really important. And I'm sure when you go into practices, that may be something that you help them with is, okay, where is an area that we can designate that's quote okay, like the designated food drink area that people can keep items to be more accessible and therefore more likely to be consumed. So lastly, we talked about um, pillar one, we talked about pillar two, and now we're on to pillar three. And that's a pillar that you mentioned that you call strengthen. And I'm kind of giggling to myself a little because I'm just imagining the eye rolls that go on. You say, we're all gonna strengthen our bodies, and it's like, oh boy, here we go. He's, bringing in the boot camp. And no, it's not about that. There's a lot of different ways to strengthen our bodies, and it's so important because when we're not strong is when the body fails, just like anything. So, um, tell me more about this pillar of strengthening and how that might be applicable to a team environment.
Yes, this is again, this is the third pillar that I'll talk about in this episode. There's a few more, but I think that this one is I hate to prioritize them. Maybe it's like having children. I love them all equally, but especially this one. Strengthening. So the tough part of human physiology is that we lose muscle mass and strength unless you are very purposeful about trying to maintain that. We really typically peak out in both muscle mass and strength in our very early 30s. And the benefits of having muscle mass and strength are numerous. And the benefits of resistance training, strength training, numerous, not the least of which is decreased symptoms of depression, better mood control, less stress, better blood sugar control, and ultimately making the job feel easier. You can imagine like the stronger you are, that heavy dog doesn't feel so heavy. And I think that it's if we really are honest with ourselves and we think back through our, work life and personal life, there are times when we want to, there's something big, a big box or a big patient that we have to move. And you think, oh, I'm going to go ask so and so if they'll do this for me because they are the bigger or the stronger one. So that's okay. It's not, it's not shame. It's just like the way we're all built differently. And so, of course, if there's a bigger, heavier thing, I'm going to look for the stronger person to help do the thing. But we also have a personal responsibility to have as much capacity as the job demands. And when I speak at conferences and speak to groups, I will ask everybody uh, very directly, raise your hand if you think vet med is a physical job. Everybody raises their hand. Of course, it's a physical job. Yes. Do you feel the aches and pains from it? Yes. Do you feel physically tired from it? Yes. Is it tougher sometimes on a Friday than it is on a Monday or Tuesday? Yes. I'm just like so physically drained. Great. Okay, we understand. We can agree that this is a physical job that can lead to aches, pains, injuries, so on, burnout. So, are people physically preparing themselves for the work? When I ask that, it's kind of crickets part of the time. Well, no, because when I get home or on the weekends, I just try to recover to do it again. And it's really doing us a disservice because we're 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 sliding down a hill, if you will. We're losing capacity, we're increasing our risk of injury, we're more fatigued. And the way to counteract that is through intentional strength training. And no, I'm not talking boot camps and I'm not talking doing burpees in the break room or, sprinting up and down stairs, trying to find the next watering station for your water bottle or whatever. But there are some things that we can at least agree upon that before you start your workday, there could be integrated 2 minutes of moving your body before you see a patient and a client and do anything else, moving your body for 2 minutes that physiologically will have a benefit. I mean, you're warming up. It's like you're going for a walk before you jog, before you run, versus typically it's turning on, unlocking the front door and going into the sprint of, 0 to 100 all day long. That's not fair for your body. You will get more out of your performance. You'll feel better doing it if just for 2 minutes, 120 seconds, if you did, for example, a couple of sit to stands from a chair, a couple of countertop push-ups. There's a few exercise bands that I like to show people that are really good postural correcting exercises. All of these things can be done in literally 2 minutes. 2 minutes to prepare your body for the physical job that you said, yes, my job is physical. You are worth 2 minutes of saying, let me warm up my body just a little bit so that first client doesn't just shock my system. And to be clear, leaders need to be involved in this as well. And this is where it's lead by example. It's showing the value that leaders have in their own physical and emotional well-being. So it's lead by example. And it's also showing that when a leader were to speak about, building this physical and emotional resilience, that it's not just lip service. It's like we're all in this together, no matter what. We're all in this together. It's not a workout class, it's not a boot camp, but it's just something to prepare for the day. And so and these can be done. This is where I kind of, again, I'll try not to get on my soapbox here, but I think too many people avoid doing physical exercise, even though the evidence is abundantly clear that we all need to be doing it, but it's avoided because it seems too daunting. It seems intimidating. I don't want to go to the gym for an hour. I don't want to be around some bro lifting super heavy weights, grunting and groaning, eating protein powder, like the cows are coming home. Like that is not what it's about. It is much more about tiny units of time with, moderate activity to kind of get you going, get your system going, to decrease your risk of injury, to have more tolerance for the activity that you can do all day long. You, your team, your colleagues, and your patients will thank you for it. Your body will thank you for it.
It is funny how for so many people who are not used to exercising regularly or strength training in any way, the idea of it can be very daunting, right? But I love how you talk about these simple things like just doing push-ups on the edge of the treatment table. You don't need any equipment. You don't need I mean, literally in 30 seconds, you could just be like, I'm going to do push-ups for 30 seconds. That is nothing, right? But yet, in the end, cumulatively, that would add up and make such a difference. And again, like you said before, this isn't about opinion. This is about physiology. It just is,
Mhm.
right? We get a body, we either take care of it or we don't, right? It's all a personal choice. But what I really appreciate is how you are bringing more accessible and more easeful ways of taking care of our bodies so that we don't get overwhelmed and then just not do it. Um, so again, we talked about these SOPs, actually setting the clinic culture around these new habits, these new ways of living. So in your opinion, what makes the difference between something that's, say, like a good idea that ultimately fades out like every other New Year's resolution versus something that actually becomes a clinic culture that in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, a new employee signs on, they walk into this culture that is actually in existence. Like, how do you actually have that happen?
It's a great question, and I think that it is going back to making sure that everything that we install is clearly understood, is simple and accessible. Again, it's 60 seconds, 120 seconds. It is getting buy-in from the culture, the people that are on staff currently, and then also really when new staff are, if there's a hiring process, this needs to be explained. This is who we are. This is how we operate. And so the framework from a true install standpoint, really need to make sure that there's, and this isn't hard to find. Step one is really identifying where is there friction, like where is the team breaking down, what are the challenges. It's that pain point that often gets, team players reaching out to me because if like I had enough, so another person's out sick or their back's hurt again or another person's burned out. But it's finding a friction point, choosing one tiny behavior, some of which we talked about today, like a tiny little moment, um, tying it to a trigger. So that can be something that happens in the OR. It can happen to be before you unlock the front door, like some definitive thing that happens that leads to an action. And we want to make sure that there's a clear language to it. And this is where I think it goes back to the leadership that needs to be transparent. And, you know, again, I think there's a more leaders. I wish a few more leaders would be a little bit more humble and say, hey, I'm going to try to do this thing for us. The science is clear. I want us all to be better. Here's the language we're going to use. I want us all to be durable. I want us all to feel good about being here. And so I'm going to try a few things. We're going to try little tiny, tiny things, but be patient with me as I try this. And, go team or get your snack or whatever it is, but just put it out there on the table. And I think that, I mean, I've been a leader and a boss and clinic owner and whatnot for a lot of my career, but I've also been a staff person for a whole lot of my career too. And so when you see or when I would feel like a leader is transparent enough to say, hey, like, hey, we're going to give this a go. I'm not sure how it's going to play out. I'm kind of rooting for them. Like I want this to work because like, wow, they're actually a normal person, a normal person, not just the person in the corner office. But when the leader gets it, leader models it, is in the trenches on the front line, trying these little tiny micro habits as well, it can really be reinforced over time. So it's the framework, there is a structure to it, and it has to start with leadership.
Yeah, 100%. Not to say an individual can't obviously do it on their own. And we see many, many, many individuals in veterinary medicine that do this. They eat well, they're healthy, they work out, right? So it's obviously not across the board, but that's not the same thing as shifting clinic culture.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, again, as you're talking, what comes to my mind is so interesting is that there's nothing that you're saying that's hard to understand. There's nothing that you're saying that perhaps I haven't already heard, and that everybody hasn't heard that oh, you should move, you should eat well, right? But yet at the same time, it's so not simple.
Yeah.
And there's and right and look well if you could take 20 seconds and do that you could take 90 seconds and do that well then if you do this in the OR and then after a while you're like whoa what like which one am I supposed to do and it can get very um it can actually be a lot if they don't choose one or two small things at a time but I can also see the benefit of a structured guidance like a program like you know what I mean like I know through VetSpan you've mentioned that you do that sort of thing and like I'm just picturing somebody saying, okay, day one, this is what we're day two, this is what day three. And they're like, okay, like I don't have to think, I don't have to decide, I don't have to like having it all spelled out. Um,
And I would even just to add to that just a little bit, not even day one and day two. It can be week one
yeah,
or for the next 3 weeks. All we're going to try to do is to make sure that before we start the day, that everybody they know where their bottle of water is and they know where their snack is. That's not today's goal. It's for the next 3 weeks. We're just going to kind of work through that.
okay.
Don't worry about anything else. Because I can tell you, again, this is like the coach coming out. If if people are coming to me and saying, "Hey, we've kind of got this 90-second block of time, and we try to do some stuff, but we're not really sure if we're doing it right. Can you help me?" And in my mind, I'm like, "Wait a minute, you already have a 90-second block just sitting there with something to do. That's the hardest part. Like
Right.
once I show up." I coach people like, in nutrition and exercise and all the stuff individually as well too. And it's like, well, I go to the gym 4 days a week for 30 minutes, but I just don't know what to do. In my mind, like, oh my gosh, you already go to the gym. This is going to be easy. Like,
Right.
you've already set it up. So once that structure is, and this is where kind of being patient that it does take longer. So
Yeah. No, 100%. So I guess in closing, what else, if a clinic leader is listening and they're like, oh gosh, if only, like I wish we could do this in my practice, because it doesn't take a genius to look and see the conditions of some of the people around. And I remember when I owned my practice, I had employees that had back problems and neck problems, or the people who got sick all the time, and you know again, we didn't always take the best care of ourselves. So now that we're all talking about this so much more and you're talking about it, what would be some good places to start with all of this?
good question. I think that the most important thing for leaders, and I would say even for individuals, so you could say, we all lead ourselves as individuals. So both for yourself personally, and then for those that are in a position to influence a team, the most important thing, the first step is deciding to start.
Hmm.
Is less about information and more about implementation. You have the information. Your questions You should not be asking somebody like me, what micronutrient dose should I have after X, Y, and Z? Like that's so far down the rabbit hole that is irrelevant to almost every human on Earth. The the real focus should be on, I know I need to start something and I'm ready to start something. Picking out a couple of behaviors that are very clear. I gave some examples, in this episode and certainly in some other episodes. Picking one thing and just being humble enough to say it out loud to your team. We're in this together. We're all going to try to hydrate a little bit better. And I know that the environment is not set up ideally because you got to go out you know, out the door, up the stairs, 4 buildings down the street to get to fill up your water bottle. But if that can't change, we're just going to do the best we can to try to make the best of it. And we're going to brainstorm together and we're going to try to implement something small. So it's being humble enough for that. And of course, last but certainly not least is you reach out to me. This is what I do, projectvetsman.com, and I help teams, individuals and teams install these systems. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, which I would love it if you would, and feel free to ask me any questions about that, um, that if you have the motivation in the realization, and if you're listening to this episode or this podcast at all, you obviously have an interest in having resilient, being resilient as an individual as well as teams, it is, your cup runneth over with information. It's time to implement some things. And we all need help implementing things and some support. And so that's what I'm here to do. So I'm happy to talk to individuals and teams on how to do that, how to make it real.
Awesome. And just one last thought, as you talked about your sequence of starting, and step one is deciding to start. And I would actually go one step further back and say, step, the pre-step before step one is actually giving yourself permission to decide to start. Because very often people want things like this, but they can't make the decision to start because they don't have permission from themselves. And saying, I can, it's actually okay to implement this in my practice. It's also okay if not everyone is on board. You don't need everybody. If 50% of the practice is on board, go for it. But you can make this choice for your practice. You can just say, you know what? I actually, it's okay for me to do this. And you know what? I'm going to. And then make that choice to start. So, it's just been a great conversation today. I love all of the little nuances you always bring to such important topics of taking care of ourselves and our health and our well-being um, in vet med, because like we said earlier, it's challenging. We all know that.
Yes. Well,
So just like Erin, I invite um, everybody to connect with me on LinkedIn. Um, Find me on my website, drjenniferedwards.com. And not the focus of today's episode, but again, I work with leaders, leadership coaching, and teams for team development culture, which is all part of what we've been talking about today. So until next time, have a great day, and we'll see you on the Resilient Vet podcast.
thanks for joining us.